2, 1.
Well, I'm sorry to say this, folks, but Thomas is actually a Christian. He just wanted us all. He's a conservative Christian. We just never expected this from him, so we've canceled him. Now, with that out of the way, speaking the video, Thomas.
Okay. Welcome everyone to another episode of Poly-Ology, where we will be continuing a video that Cingeto has shown us at a previous engagement. And can I just get some confirmation that we are audible in the chat?
It's okay if you want to say that I'm audible, but Thomas is not. Oh, some random geek is there. Hey, some random geek.
Okay.
Did you get confirmation?
I don't know. Some random geek and Rhuagh and now Mistress Angelica. Can you all hear us? Okay, cool. Okay, cool.
Yes, it's all working. We actually succeeded with tech.
Yes.
Thomas actually succeeded on his intelligence roll for once.
Yes.
I'm impressed.
Yes.
Maybe he's not a Christian after all.
Also, I am a good boy, apparently. Anyway, so we are now...
No, Thomas is not a good boy because Thomas is cis.
Okay.
I'm kidding, by the way, guys. So, alright, jokes out of the way.
Anyway, we will... So we will now be going into the video now.
I don't think there's very many people here yet. And sorry, I just had to pause the YouTube video.
That's rather low, Thomas. Can you turn up the volume?
Sorry, what?
I can't hear her.
So, I wasn't sure I was really going to do one today, but it's been on my mind about...
Can all of you hear this?
Now we can, yes.
Okay. Anyway, let's continue.
Mainstream paganism, because I've done a lot of talking about...
Pause it. Mainstream paganism is such an oxymoron. There is no...
I assume she might be talking about something like Wicca.
There is no mainstream Wicca, though. That's the whole point.
Isn't Gardnerian sort of the main...
No.
Oh.
Not really anymore. There are many different traditions within Wicca, such as there's fairy Wicca.
Okay.
There's Dianic Wicca. There's Alexandrian Wicca, which is actually very close to Gardnerian Wicca. And there's everything and there's also Odyssean Wicca, which is based off of the Odyssey somehow. I'm not in Odyssean. I never was an Odyssean Wiccan, so I can't say for sure how. That and the Anglo-Saxon Wicca is also another popular one. So there is no real mainstream paganism here. We're a bunch of we're a disorganized bunch. Which is actually exactly how Wiccans like it, usually.
Anyway, let's continue.
Well, I've done a lot of talking about why right-wing people really should, if not embrace European ethnic faith, at least be open to it, at least be interested in like a holistic conception of our ethnic origins, and ethnic faith is part of that, as it is for all cultures.
Okay. Did you want to say something, Thomas?
I was assuming that you had something to say at that point.
So her talk about ethnicity here, when she says ethnicity, what she really means is racial. You can have that sort of cut between. So, like, for example, let's say that I'm Norse. I'm a heathen. Norse, I also adapt various parts of the Norse culture into my practice. So ethnicity isn't unimportant. It can still be a part, but that's not what she's saying here, ultimately, as we'll probably end up seeing. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that ethnicity is flexible.
Mm-hmm.
You can be an ethnic whatever so long as you adopt sort of the culture of those people.
Yeah.
Not that even adopting the culture is a requirement of practice, mind you. It's not.
Yeah, in a linguistic...
You could theoretically have a new branch of American Hellenism that has nothing to do with Greece, simply because the Greek gods, for whatever reason, decided to come about here.
Yeah. In terms of in linguistic terms, at least in the Greek language, there is and I'm not sure about other languages, but there is a difference between genos, where we get the word genetic and genes, and ethnos, which is where we get the word ethnic. Genos, you can think of it as kind of like the blood, whereas ethnos is sort of the custom and the culture of whatever society you're talking about.
So yeah, I mean, she's very recently. Also, the other thing here is this is mainly because I know this is what she's gonna get into, whether she dog whistles it or just bluntly says it. There's no such thing as a white identity, and not so much white identity.
A European, what I meant. Or a European identity.
Well, not even that, but there's no such thing. More important here is there's no such thing as a white ethnos, because white people have different cultures, and these cultures conflict with each other all the time.
Yeah, Spanish.
There is a white identity, mind you. There are like traits that are socialized into. That is to say, there are traits that are socialized into white people within various social structures, and these traits do tend to give white people privilege over, say, a black person. Mm-hmm. That is a thing, but a white ethnos is not a thing.
Yeah, because there is, for instance, Spanish culture and Serbian culture and Hungarian culture. There are just a whole bunch of different cultures.
Right. All right, so continue.
Yeah.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. These moderators are here. Good, because it's like I'm not even doing these on a schedule, and in some cases, I'm not even announcing them in advance. Like, I don't know. I'm so new to live streaming. Does anybody else do it this way, or am I just the only scatterbrained person who just does it whenever I feel like
you're definitely scattered-brained and probably and missed a huge part of education, from what I'm guessing. In response to her.
Uh-huh.
All right, continue.
Okay.
I'm not a very organized person, but it works for me. So, I'm glad to see that there's actually people here. Thank you. But so I've been thinking a lot about like the ethnos and the concept of a holistic ethnos, and if you read my articles, you know, the holistic wholeness of being that I talk about. So because of that, I do feel that people who are waking up to the threats that we face as a culture,
pause it.
that there's a responsibility on the part of the individual.
Thomas, pause it.
Yeah, I paused it.
Okay. So, threats to the white culture don't actually exist. Usually what white people tend to do is steal from other cultures and appropriate.
Duh.
Like, literally all our good music can be traced back to African culture.
Yeah, because if you look at, for instance, metal, you that's derivative of rock, and rock is derivative of blues, and blues is derivative of various African
Jazz.
American. Yeah, it is derivative of jazz, and jazz is derivative um, of
Of African cultures. Yes.
African American cultures. Yeah,
Which is which is derivative from African culture.
yeah,
And yeah, basically we steal a lot. That's more of what we do. So any sort of so-called cultural invasion is really just the taking back.
hmm
And that's really all there is to say about that. White culture is the dominant culture,
hmm
at least in the United States. There are some areas where some white people do face, but that's a more complex ethnic issue. That mainly has to deal with colonization and a very nasty history.
yeah,
Other than that, though, a lot of like racial and ethnic constructs, some of them were even set up by Europeans. Funny enough, like the Hutu and the Tutsi.
yeah.
That was a Belgian thing.
hmm
So yeah, continue.
To go all the way, like don't just start and then hit a brick wall. If we're going to start remembering who we are and doubling down on it and taking a stand for our heritage, then the holistic wholeness of being includes every aspect of our culture.
Okay, you can pause this.
Now, what now? From what little she's spoken about this, what can we gather holistic wholeness to be?
So what I'm gathering here is that she's probably a Folkist heathen, because in Hebrew there's this idea of the Moonin, in the Moonin. So when she speaks of memory, there's this idea in heathenry that the Moonin can, which is basically your mind and your memory, can sort of transcend a little bit of generations. It's a very like
Oh, okay.
esoteric one.
That sounds kind of
Moonin,
yeah.
hmm?
Sorry, go
So
ahead.
what she's probably arguing for is basically this, because when you think of the right man, how the right wing tend to stereotype the North as these huge, strong, sort of basically like the Nazi and Aryan man.
hmm
What she's basically trying to do is ask people to go back to sort of this prototype as a so-called Moonin, that is a previous sort of life from your ancestors.
hmm
What she's admitting is that everyone has Moonin, and that you don't necessarily want to live the life of your ancestors at all. The Vikings were, there was a lot of death back then,
hmm
and death, and also they were very thin-skinned. Like the Vikings were the archetype for toxic masculinity, which was called Drengar back then, or manliness, as I think a rough translation of Drengar. To be called a Drengar was to be called like, is one of the highest compliments that you could be paid. Whereas to be called a woman was one of the lowest.
hmm
So anyhow, you can continue.
Because as I've been saying, it's a tapestry woven of many threads, and as soon as you start to pull out threads one at a time, the tapestry will unravel. So that's why I've been speaking more to like right-wing identitarians who are awakening,
You can
to
pause this.
tell them like don't.
So what she's trying to do is induce what we call on the left as false consciousness. The idea that our economic and our condition as of being oppressed is not due to the rich holding vast majority of resources and whatnot, but rather that it's because we're letting all the immigrants in and all these basically brown skinned people in.
Hmm.
Like literally any sort of immigration. From a historical perspective, of course, it's all nonsense.
hmm
So you can continue.
Stop, keep going, because there's more to learn and there's more to awaken in ourselves, and especially to lecture right-wing, supposedly pro-white people who claim to be, they claim to be pro-white, but then they endorse universalism. That's problematic, especially when they disparage the native indigenous culture of Europe. So that's where, like, my head.
Okay, one thing I have to say here: there is no native indigenous culture of Europe. There are many indigenous cultures of Europe, which
Well, here's the other funny thing. If we use her logic, then she should be Christian, not heathen.
because she's not indigenous to Europe.
No, because Christianity is the dominant religion in Europe. Those cultures didn't die.
Yeah.
Like like Brythonic culture did not die when paganism went out.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there. And that's how we can actually reconstruct some of the religions by taking what the Christians took and made into their own and basically taking it back.
Yeah.
So by her logic, you should be Christian, not heathen, because Christianity is the indigenous religion of Britain, Scandinavia, and the various other places.
Mm-hmm. But again, they were very different. Well, I wouldn't say very different, but they were different cultures throughout all of Europe.
Oh yeah, they're different. They're different
So
cultures. You do not be. Italy is different than Hungary. I can
yeah,
guarantee you that.
yeah. Even back in ancient times, because uh, um, the the thing that I'm about to bring up is problematic in some ways, but Germania or Germania by Tacitus uh, explicitly details the differences between the various Germanic tribes in that in the area that the Romans called Germania. So
Germania. Mm-hmm.
so they are different.
Yes, there are different. There were different tribes. They had different traditions. Anglo-Saxon heathenry is different than continental heathenry.
Mm-hmm.
And even among the continental, there are probably a bunch of differences that are now lost to us, although they used to speak a common language, which was being Proto-Germanic.
Mm-hmm.
It has been at
But
lately, but in talking to some other people and some experiences that we've all shared, I felt that it was now important to speak to pagans who are in the leftist sphere and the universalist sphere, even though I'm sure they're not listening to me because they have really demonized me. Sorry, my dog is really wanting attention right now, so he might be distracting
Ozzy,
me.
so as someone who believes in demons, this is an insult to demons to call her a demon.
Okay.
Basically, demons are actually just like they're spirits. They're actually kind of neutral. Some are malevolent, others are not. Some are really weird, like Pazuzu. He'll cause a famine but protect children.
Yeah.
So anyhow, continue.
Okay.
He wants his back scratched, and he's just gonna keep like shoving his body against my legs until I do it. But no, that's my train of thought. Well, yeah, I'm sure that the Universalist pagans aren't actually listening to me, but just in case one of them decides, well, maybe I should listen for myself and make up my own mind instead of doing what other people tell me, which I know leftists are not very good at that. But I have hope, because a lot of us were steeped in that mentality in the past too, and a lot of us were able to break free. A lot of us were able to say, wait a second, I am a sentient being,
Posit.
and
I have literally never met someone on the right who was a former leftist and knew what actual leftist theory is.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you delve deep into it, there's really no going. I've seen people on the right switch to left wing, but I've never seen left wingers switch to right wing. I never saw somebody go and say, there are a lot of Jewish people around or something like that. That's just not something that happens in my experience. If it does, then I highly doubt that that person was ever truly left or knew any actual leftist theory. They just hung out with anarchists or whatnot.
Okay.
can.
Continue.
Sorry, this dog is like really wanting attention right now. Oh my goodness. If we were able to do it, there's hope for other drones out there to break the programming and become free thinking people and wake up for themselves. Vladimir,
There's just something funny about this kind of rhetoric here. I can't exactly put my finger on it, but there's something kind of
To me, because I hear it so often, it's just dull. Really.
She's talking about keeping the same culture and not changing anything from the past, but then she's talking about individualism and thinking for oneself.
yeah.
Yeah.
She's conflating a lot of terms like universalism. What does she mean by universalism?
She means people who aren't focused.
Okay.
Basically, pagans who allow. Basically, someone who would allow. Who, God forbid, apparently, would allow a black man to worship Thor.
Mm-hmm.
Which is apparently a crime because, skin color is somehow magical.
Mm-hmm.
Which it's not. This has been disproven time and time again in sociology and anthropology.
Mm-hmm.
calm down.
Anyhow, continue.
Boy, he's really distracting me. This is why I never used to do these things live. This is why I always used to record. Then I can press pause and deal with it and come back. He's just biting me. Anyway, so in the universalist sphere, there is this idea that, well, first of all, they think that folkism, or being folkish, is racist. So I guess like for a mainstream pagan who has heard this rhetoric, that's the first thing to address. What is folkism and what does it mean in a pagan context? And also for right-wingers who are not used to this and don't know what these two factions of paganism is. So in the pagan world, there's the universalist camp and then there's the folkish camp. The universalists believe that the gods call who they call, and so, a white person could be called to some ancient Chinese god or some voodoo
Pause
African
it.
god if they feel like it.
Pause it. Yeah, like, literally, if you hold the gods as external actors, that's the only logical, theological position to hold.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you end up having to limit God somehow by ethnicity, which makes no sense.
Yeah, because gods are who they are, not limited beings. They don't subscribe to the same limitations physically or metaphysically that beings in the material world make because because they're the ones who
And plus-
produce. They're the ones who produce. Yes.
And also, skin color would be such an arbitrary demarcator here because, again, race is not biological, it's a social construct.
Yeah.
So what? Does that mean that Thor is going to answer Tutsi, who has a different shaped nose than a Hutu? It's nonsense. And what about for those in Brazil who have like 11 different classifications of race? What, do they all have to now have their same, do they have to have different gods answering them?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it makes no logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
Continue.
And likewise, Africans and Chinese and Mexicans, they can be called to Thor and Odin. Whereas folkish people believe that each ethnic group has their own set of gods and their own indigenous worldview that belongs to us as individuals. And now, leftists are...
Yes, and it's nonsense.
Because they will use the term...
Sorry, what, Calon?
I'd say yes, that's what they believe, and it's nonsense, and it's usually just racial dog whistling.
Yeah, because it was very much not the case in ancient times. Because
No, it wasn't. You had...
Yeah.
Go on, Thomas.
Because I think later on in this video she mentions ISIS, but if you just take ISIS as an example, uh,
Isis was also what
yeah,
worshipped in Greece and
yeah,
Rome, as well as Egypt.
yeah,
It was actually a
and
very popular goddess for magical purposes.
yeah, and also with the cult of Mithras. Uh,
Mithras.
Mithras, yes. Mithraeans have been found all throughout the ancient Roman
Europe.
world, from
Yeah.
all the way from Britain down to places like Egypt and Syria. So, and no one really paid any mind to that based off of any sort of racial background, racial
Racial background.
justification,
And from a heathen
because yes,
perspective, the fun fact about, especially when you look at the sagas, a lot of sagas don't even take place in Norway. They take place in like France or Hungary, which is kind of funny.
and
And
yes,
also, there's this little Norse tribe who would play a much bigger role in history than anyone would have thought. They were called the Rus. The Rus would go over and interbreed and marry and do and whatnot with the Slavs. Eventually, the Rus became Slavs, and eventually, this tribe would become a nation called Russia. So, yeah, talk about cultural mixing.
yeah, and also this whole idea of race is very much a modern concept. No one in the ancient world had this concept of race like she's purporting. She's being very ahistorical and anachronistic by conflating sort of a tribe with a modern sort of racial characterization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most tribes are familial based, based on your clan that you were born into. But the idea of an actual sort of race, like between black people and white people, they didn't care. They just wanted loot.
Yeah,
All right, continue.
it was only brought about when during colonization as a means of determining who was superior and who was inferior.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much. All right, continue.
Cultural appropriation willy-nilly all the time. I mean, a girl who wore a Chinese-style dress to the prom got absolutely skewered in like international media for cultural appropriation because she thought a Chinese dress was pretty and she liked it, so she wore it. Where it's like, how is that cultural appropriation? She wore a dress. A dress, like, come on, people. So leftists on one hand will spew stuff like that, but then they'll say, "Oh, well, the thing that should be the most sacred, the most
Pause it.
protected."
All right, I have no idea what she means by dress or whatnot. I
Uh,
don't know that episode.
I remember. I actually remember this. Basically, what she described. It was just an argument over cultural appropriation, and I remember uh, various Asian people on Twitter were complaining that they or criticizing this particular person by saying that their culture is not your prom dress, basically. But that's not really relevant to anything else that she's saying. So it's kind of a moot point.
Yeah. Well, what she's saying is that leftists, or so-called leftists, call out that cultural appropriation, yet they don't call out cultural appropriation when it comes to so-called Western culture. She doesn't define Western culture because it's understood to mean anyone who, or not Western, she doesn't call out exactly why an Asian doing something that is typically done in America would be, or worshiping a god of a different culture, is cultural appropriation. Because the hidden premise is that the Asian isn't white. If the Asian were white, she'd have no problem.
I see.
So that's really what's going on here. It's not about cultural appropriation. It's purely about black. It's clearly about black versus white.
Anybody can just have that. Who cares? It's not related to anything special. Now, the study of the ethnos that I've been embarking on recently really defends the folkish view. Oh my god, he found a sock and he's just like shaking it and putting it on my lap. Stop it, Vladimir. Oh my goodness. This is why I don't do live. He's been very good usually, because when he sees me sitting here with the headset, he knows that it's time to be quiet, but I think I've been doing this so often that he forgot. Vladimir, get in bed. Go get in bed. Go on. Go on.
Sorry, we're just going to skip ahead a little bit here.
Okay. Poor dog, having to live in such a disgusting household filled with racists.
Now, if you start to look into ethnicity and you start to study like the origins of religion, or you go back to tribal society, not only in Europe but worldwide, like there was never ever a name for religion, because religion was always one with your ethnicity.
No, that's not in our modern sense. There wasn't. That's a purely Judeo-Christian construct, but there was a sense of the numinous, so to speak, in that it was separate from other things, even going back to Plato. So to say that there was no such thing as religion is a bit inaccurate. It was just conceptualized differently. So she's wrong on that point. So continue.
Just always was. And if you start to study the mythological pantheons, and you start to get into like cross-linguistic analysis and the etymological origins of certain words, what you find is that our languages even evolved side by side with our mythologies, and there are many words that we still use today in English that have their very earliest
Thomas? Yeah, because you communicate mythology with language. I don't know if she knows this, but if you don't speak about mythology, you can't really communicate.
Okay.
Roots
Thomas?
in our mythic worldview. So this is very much, language is another layer of the ethnos. Mythos is another language of the ethnos. And these were cultural specific. It is historically inaccurate to say
that's
language. That's a lie. Latin was spoken across all of Europe at one point, with its various dialects and whatnot.
Yeah, and also
those dialects became what we call the Romance languages.
And regarding her take on the mythos, or muthos as it's properly pronounced in Greek, it was very different cultures had rather similar myths, like the idea of the Aeneid was apparently a widespread thing in around the Latin languages. Well, I mean the Latin peoples.
Well,
I mean.
Also the idea of Greek and gods and titans parallels that of Norse between the Jotnar and the Ossir. Although I don't know if titans are considered as destructive as the Jotnar are. I need to ask Helen if that.
No, they generally aren't.
Although I'd recommend,
yes,
I'd recommend you talk to Edward Butler about that.
Probably will. I will at some point.
That
All right.
paganism was not ethnic. That's a straight up lie. It's a blatant lie if anybody were to say that. Now, it's like here I am because I'm mostly speaking more to the right wing now and to people who are concerned about the loss of culture and our heritage. So, on one hand, I have to try to explain to white people that why we have an ethnic faith, like many other cultures in the world do.
Her faith
We
isn't
have been
ethnic.
denied our ethnic faith, and
There are many ethnic faiths in the world, and saying that there's a white ethnic faith is anachronistic at best and ahistorical and racist at worst.
Well, it's just racist. I don't give. These people aren't to be given any order.
Yeah. I mean there is an association between the various uh, what we in the modern sense would call pagan faiths and whatever people they were in, but it wasn't an exact one-to-one correspondence. And multiple people could,
Titans are less evolved in a nutshell. Okay, good to know.
yeah.
I'll probably ask you about that later, Natio, if you don't mind, because I am kind of curious about the comparison there.
hmm Anyway, let's continue.
why it's important to go back to it. But then, I decided, well, maybe it's appropriate to mention to leftist pagans that this is not like a universal free-for-all either. It is ethnic. This is the number one most important point about, quote, paganism, which I don't...
No!
Yes, we realize that. Yeah, we realize that paganism claims to be ethnic. You've been stating that for the past however many minutes. That doesn't mean it's correct.
By, say, by saying that by saying that ethnicity is the most important part of paganism is very that's a very materialistic way of thinking about things because it's putting the ethnicity first and the gods second. When you really should, if you want to be a pious individual, you should foster a relationship with the gods no matter what your blood is. Just and if there are any uh, cultural traditions that go along with worshiping certain deities, then go along with that. But blood is not the end all and be all of this.
It's funny that it's sad that they think so. But
Yeah.
let's go on.
even really like to use the term paganism. I prefer to just say ethnic faith because that's what it is. But now, if you were to make the analogy to another ethnic faith, then you might actually say that this is the only common ethnic faith that's widespread in the West today, and I'm speaking of Judaism. Judaism is an ancient ethnic faith. It was tied to the Hebrew people, who later became known as the Jews. And nobody questions whether that should be a universal free-for-all. Nobody questions whether, people can just...
As far as I'm aware, people can join Judaism if they wanted to, no matter what blood they have.
Yeah, it's also really difficult,
Yeah.
which is the point. If you want to be a Jew, then you got to go through. You have to really want to be one. In other words, it weeds out those who are like, oh, I just want to be a Jew.
Yeah, but it's not making the claim.
There is a culture,
but
yeah.
they're not making the claim that because you're of a certain ethnicity you can't join, as far as I'm
Yeah,
aware.
I'm
But
sure you could find a
yeah,
Folkish Jew out there somewhere.
yeah.
Find Folkish trash everywhere these days.
I mean, I guess you can look at the IDF for that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
pick and choose and claim Jewish faith without like a full conversion. And And Judaism doesn't really seek to convert people anyway. They're not an evangelistic faith because there is that ethnic component.
Now, I'm not I don't know that much about Judaism, but that's actually Judaism is one of the only monotheistic faiths that I can actually get on board with because they aren't evangelical. But it's
Well, not they aren't they aren't evangelical in the sense that they don't proselytize, but there are some sort of like Haredim and whatnot. There are some areas in Israel where if you're not a Jew, life is going to be extremely difficult for you, if not impossible. So there are some informal pressures, but
yeah.
overall, no, they don't go out and proselytize.
I'm speaking in terms of a general thing here, as opposed to just modern day Israel, because modern day Israel is very problematic in various ways, like the oppression of the Palestinian people, and I think that the the majority of Jewish people who live there are just using it as a cudgel against them in order to do a form of ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, that probably sums up Netanyahu's government.
Yeah.
Anyhow, let's continue.
Were born into Judaism, and that's why you see even people who don't believe the religion anymore still very often will say, "Well, I am ethnically Jewish," even if I happen to be a atheist. This was the
Mm-hmm.
case for all religion in the ancient world, all religion until the advent of monotheism, which started weeding
No,
people out.
no, it wasn't. That wasn't how it worked at all.
As far as I'm aware, the cult of ISIS spread at least a couple decades, if not a century uh, before Christianity. So I don't exactly know what her point is here.
Of their ethnoses. And so sometimes the argument is made in the universalist pagan camp, that the gods did travel. And they'll use examples like there is an image on one of these cauldrons. Um,
Wait, pause
and you
it.
can even look it up. I think
Thomas, pause
sometimes
it.
you'll find it under like.
Yeah.
Wait, did she just say that they'll sometimes say that the gods can travel, and she's about to argue against that the gods can travel? So does that mean if the Earth is destroyed, the gods are destroyed?
Oh dear.
I didn't think Earthbound religion was quite that, but okay.
I wonder if she's trying to bring in a a Hellenic idea wherein the various temples of particular gods are their homes, supposedly. Uh, but
It's the same thing with Sumerians, actually, where they
yeah,
temple are sort of their homes, but
yeah. So I'm not sure if that's what she's going at.
anyhow, continue. Let's find out what
Yeah,
she's going at.
one of my friends, Angela Nasios, would probably be the better person to ask about that than me.
Mm-hmm. Continue.
Yes.
Like the Viking Buddha or something like that. And it does sort of look like a Buddha.
Viking heroes.
It's sitting cross-legged, like as if it's meditating, and it has swastikas on it. And that was found somewhere in, like, I believe in Sweden or somewhere in Scandinavia. So people will use that as some kind of an example when it's like we don't even really know for sure that that is a Buddha.
As far as I'm aware, it was a Buddha, and it was just something that a merchant picked up from trade in somewhere in Eastern Europe, and that cauldron made its way all the way from India to there. So
to Scandinavia.
Yeah, so
Which makes sense because the Vikings were traders.
yes,
They would raid and trade.
Yeah,
because there's nothing else you can really do up in an area where you can't see the sun for 6 months out of the year.
yeah, yeah. Norse traders went all the way from Scandinavia, of course, all the way down to places like Morocco and also Baghdad.
You had the Varangian Guard.
Yeah, you had the Varangian Guard in the Byzantine Empire, or I'm sorry, the Eastern Roman Empire, um, and this really demolishes the idea that these people kept to themselves. People did travel. They did have the world was an interconnected world. Definitely not as much as it is now, of course, with the advent of things like air travel and the internet. But it was still very, interconnected. Anyway.
It doesn't say Buddha. It's not clear.
It doesn't say Buddha.
But nobody knows for sure.
Guys. Whenever we make an altar, we have to put the names of the gods. If we don't do that, it's not an altar.
Mm-hmm.
Cingeto would appreciate that.
Yeah.
He had an issue.
Nice callback to his debate with IP.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't put down that it's a they or an altar, it's not an altar.
Anyway.
But the Vikings were traders. They did travel, and just because there is this image on an artifact, we don't know that it was ever used ritually. There's no evidence that there were Viking Buddhists walking around.
There's no evidence. There's no evidence that Stonehenge was technically ever really used ritually. It's just how it. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Like, if you want to talk about pure empirical evidence, you're not going to find it here. It takes a little bit of training in order to recognize which structures are probably religious and which aren't.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, and
I love how they use the veil of ignorance of history to try to justify something that they're trying to justify, say, is historical. It's like, well, it could have been something different, therefore we're right.
Yeah, it's weird. They're making sort of the non-existence of a claim evidence for that claim.
The absence of universalist claims, therefore Folkism true. That's real scholarship there, guys.
Yeah.
Proud of you.
I mean,
you should title this series "Why Universalists Laugh at Folkis." Continue.
Extrapolation, not kind of. It is an extrapolation. But there are other examples of traveling gods would be mainly in the Roman Empire. So they'll talk about, Isis.
Hey, so there's this traveling god. His name was Jesus, apparently. I mean, you don't really have to look far for examples of traveling gods.
Yeah.
The Yoruba actually are very famous for this. Eshu became Papa Legba, and various other synchronizations between Yoruba and Christianity.
Anyway, let's continue.
Had cults of veneration in Rome, so she traveled. Or Athena was originally mainly worshipped in Athens, and then there'd be cults to her like elsewhere, like on the Italian peninsula under Rome. But you have to remember the Mediterranean actually became, like, under the Roman Empire, multicultural towards the end when it all collapsed.
It was multicultural beforehand. Pause it.
Yeah.
It was multicultural beforehand. In fact, one of the biggest things that the Romans ended up having to do because of the ethnic conflict and whatnot was give Roman citizenship to the Italian, to the rest of Italy.
Mhm.
They originally didn't really have it. You had the Suebi and the Etrusci.
Mhm.
So the Etrusci weren't Italians. They had their what they. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember if the language originated in Italy. I think it's a linguistic isolate.
Latin?
No,
Oh, no, Etruscan.
Etruscan.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Um,
Etrusci. Yes,
I can't say to that.
I know there are like a few very sort of odd linguistic isolates in Europe. I know Basque is one of them for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they had to. Italy had its own. Italy was always sort of working to balance ethnic stuff.
Mhm.
Just also look at the Romans in Judea.
Mhm.
That's multi-ethnic. Of course, there's
And
conflict.
you could make arguments that a lot of the ancient Greek world as we know as it today had many different ethnicities, because if you look at a lot of different,
Alexander the Great.
well, yeah, you have we have the Macedonians, but also just if you look at there were just a lot of different cultural traditions and religious traditions in various cities, and actually some Egyptian deities actually were starting to be worshipped in Greece
Yeah,
before the Roman Empire, like
yeah,
Isis, and also the syncretic deity of Zeus Ammon, for instance.
the Deus Amon.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have evidence of a small Buddhist community in Alexandria in Egypt. So,
Yeah,
uh,
very
yeah,
said very interconnected.
yeah, not just in terms of monetary trade, but also in terms of religious and cultural trade.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are, now at this point, I'm speaking to pagans, not to anyone else, but if you are a pagan who
Yes, please
believes
speak
that
to us.
Christianity is wrong and bad, and especially if you are a universalist pagan, something you need to wrap your head around here is those gods really traveled like towards the end, like towards the multicultural cesspool that it became. And because of that, this was mentioned in my article, Ethnos to Ethnos, in your
How's
The
it?
Sun, issue 6.
So she's literally saying that because the gods traveled towards the end of those empires, towards like the end of their lifespan, therefore folkism is true.
But even if she's true, does that make any of the does that make
No, it
any
doesn't
of
because
well, I'm not really playing devil's advocate here, but I'm just saying that even if it is true, does that make any of the religious practices that people made in ancient Rome to supposedly foreign deities, would that be considered invalid?
apparently, uh, yeah, like also just the idea that the gods travel towards the end of the collapse of these empires is kind of nonsense. One, Greece wasn't an empire yet. You still see, well, I mean, Greece was. Yes, that's actually true. You had the Athenians instead. Um,
Yeah, and then you had Alexander the
Spartans,
Great later on,
Persians. Yeah,
but that was later on, and but even before that, during the time of the city states, there were various religious elements that were traded.
synchronized,
Yeah, well, yeah, I shouldn't say traded.
syncretized.
Yeah, syncretized.
And you
Like,
also have,
yeah,
in early Roman times, a synchronization between the Etrusci and the Roman,
yeah. Uh,
like
a, a,
Minoa.
a good example of this would be the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. Artemis, the ancient Greek Hellenic deity, was syncretized with Kubele, also known as the Magna Mater, uh, and and that's an element of syncretization that
Syncretization. Mm-hmm.
yeah that existed centuries before the Roman Empire even existed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So her mental gymnastics are amusing, but
Mm-hmm.
wrong.
Um, because I quoted Dr. I think his first name is James Russell in the Germanization of early Christianity,
Positive.
and he
Wait, did she just say that like it's encoded? The gods are encoded in the genes.
I don't know.
I think she just did. If she just did, that means I'm pretty sure I know actually the source. She's heathen. She's a Folkist heathen.
I see.
Yeah.
mentioned in the introduction that ancient Rome was basically because of the situation where they had multiculturalism and urbanization, that it had people feeling like just alienization, just individuals who no longer fit.
This is very problematic because supposedly multiculturalism existed centuries prior, and people from Egypt were migrating to Greece, and then when you had the expansion of the Persian Empire, you had Persians migrating into Anatolia, and then Ionia, and you just had and multiculturalism was not the death of those empires in any means.
It was a combination of various factors.
Yeah. Um, uh, in terms of the collapse of the Roman Empire, I'd say that it was a combination of the Germanic invasions um, as well as elements like the influx of Christianity and sort of the economic turmoil that existed at that time.
Yeah, because you have a huge freaking empire. I
Yeah,
mean, granted, Roman Empire is by no means the biggest empire that ever was.
no, it pales in comparison to empires like the Mongol Empire or the British Empire.
The Mongols, they just decided to throw a whole wrench into history.
Yeah, just for the fun of it.
It's like, really, guys?
Mhm.
Yeah, born a peasant and raises to the top to not only unite Mongolia but conquer over half the planet.
Yeah,
Like, really?
Cohesive ethnic culture. So if you're going to point to Rome as an example of picking and choosing gods, well, that's actually an example of where things went wrong, not an example of how things should be. Because that also was an environment of people feeling confused and not fitting in and not having a holistic wholeness of being.
that is absolutely not true. Um,
So, I wonder if she would go tell Julius Caesar that he wasn't being holistic enough.
yeah, holistic wholeness of being, whatever the hell kind of metaphysical jargon that means.
Yeah, I don't
In
know.
their society.
Continue.
And that is actually why these crazed cults, Christianity was actually considered an Oriental cult. It wasn't considered European. It was considered like an Eastern cult. Um, that's why they were able to take hold, because you had these lost, alienated people who were not in
No, that's not why
cohesive.
Christianity took hold. It's a much more complex. it's a much more complex process than what she's making it out to be.
Yeah.
Especially like during the foundation, Christianity, the foundation of Christianity was more like an explosion of various different sort of schools that came into being.
Yeah. I mean, would
Like
she?
you have the
Yes.
Gnostics, for example, who went ahead and denied the divinity of Jesus.
Yeah. And then I wonder what she would say about the spread of the cult of Cybele or the Magna Mater, because that also could be considered Oriental, but as far as but there was no conflict at all in that area. It was a very additive time, and just disputing that makes you pseudo historical.
Ethnic environment anymore. And so when you have people being part of an ethnic group is an innate natural desire on the part of human beings
No,
within
no,
our
no, no, no,
natural
no.
state.
Mm-mm. The natural desire is to be part of a group, be it ethnic or otherwise. People like a sense of belonging, and sometimes ethnicity provides that. Other times it doesn't, depending on where you are. Sometimes it can even be alienating if you're, as can be seen when people experience culture shock and whatnot. So yeah, it's a varied thing. Not
Yeah, it's definitely not the cut and dry story that she's making it out to be.
That is how we function. So if we've been broken from that and we've been separated from that, then that allows universalist doctrine to come in and like suck people into it. Because we crave that. We crave community. We crave where it used to be that all of the
so. What she's saying
community
is
would
that
get
ethnicity
together.
is the basis of community.
Huh?
What she's saying is that ethnicity is the basis of community.
Which is not true at all
So
in.
you can have religious communities, you can have political communities, you can have many different other kinds of community.
Yeah.
Ethnicity has, you can have an ethnic community even. Those do exist. A lot of them become problematic because racism then becomes an issue. But yeah, no. All right,
To
continue.
share festivals and rituals and coming of age ceremonies and springtime festivals and autumn festivals and community holidays. But we don't do that anymore. So that is why going to church has
How's
become
it?
so.
Well, she doesn't do it anymore? Well, she's not really a good pagan then, is she? Those happen all the time. I don't know what she's talking about. Has she not been around has she not listened to other traditions?
Apparently not, because traditions are solely based off of
Ethnic.
genetics.
Yeah, apparently. I mean, when you read like books on Wicca, that's one of the things they include. At least decent books on Wicca, or coming of age ceremonies and whatnot. I don't. They're performed.
Important to say American Christians because there is no secular
American Christian.
cohesion
Okay.
of culture anymore in the mainstream. It was the same thing in ancient Rome. Exact same thing.
Ancient Rome was not secular.
Yeah. There was very much a religious element in the Roman state.
Yeah.
The Pontifex Maximus, the head priest of
Literally
Rome,
the bridge builder.
uh, was a political term. I mean, was a political office. And in a non-Roman example, you have uh, countries like the Persian Empire, which the ruling class were the Magi, or
Agi.
a Magi. Yes, thank you, Calon. Who were
We don't use that filthy modern pronunciation here.
who were a class of high priests. So secularism did not exist until what, the 1700s, something like that.
I forget which. I mean, even like with there's John Locke.
Yeah.
I think he's known for like his secularism, but
I don't know. I
the
haven't.
history of secularism isn't really that interesting to me.
Yeah, secularism is. We could do an entire episode on the problems with secularism. But anyway, let's continue.
United States and ancient Rome. That is apt. That is not a bad comparison to make at all. There are many, many parallels to that.
There are.
I mean, in the very vaguest sense, because we do have a somewhat representative government that somewhat existed in Rome, but
Not really.
I said somewhat.
For feudal Europe. Yeah, it was more the basis for feudal Europe in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, like the free class system
Yeah.
and whatnot. That's more of what it was.
Mhm.
And paganism, because it was just part of our worldview, it functioned on the secular and the religious level, because there was no
Paganism
enforcement
functions on the
uniform.
secular level. What?
I think what she's trying to, the argument that she's trying to make is one that I've seen other people make, not specifically Folkus, but the argument that because religion didn't exist in the modern sense, and that whatever form of paganism existed in a particular area, that permeated throughout the culture, and everyone, despite their different levels of piety or religious commitments, sort of all had that as sort of a collective idea that they could base things from. I'm not entirely sure about the validity of that. But do you have problems with that?
Say it again. Sorry. I was
I
off looking at.
Well, because there wasn't a stark difference between society and religion back then as there is now. People just saw sort of religious ideas as just the way things were, I guess. I'm trying to.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Religion was just considered a brute fact. Well,
Yeah.
some. I mean, there is a history of atheism going back to ancient Greece.
But the atheism then was mainly. It wasn't atheism in the modern sense. Anyway, let's continue.
Well, no, yeah, no, I know what you're saying. The Norse have these same, like, I had the same issue trying to find, like, a word for atheist in Old Norse. Basically, it wasn't somebody who denied the existence of the gods, it was just somebody who didn't rely on their strength.
Yeah.
And didn't worship or perform practice and whatnot.
And the first people who are actually referred to as atheists were Christians in Greece.
Because they are atheists.
Yeah, because they directly
Are atheists.
neglect. They directly. They directly reject the notions of the gods, and no one did that to that extent until the Christians. I mean, you could make an argument for Jewish people, but I'm not entirely sure about that.
Yeah, let's continue. How much longer is left in this video, by the way?
Um, we have a lot. How much longer would you guys want to keep on going for?
We'll go for 10 more minutes,
10 more minutes. Okay.
and then we'll
So
cover the rest of this next week.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we're gonna end at 7:30 then, or 7:20. Around that time.
7:20. Yeah.
Yes.
Because people
All right. So continue.
we didn't have that conception where we had to have dogma and you must believe as somebody else says. I mean, you're allowed to have your freedom of thought, but it's within this ethnic paradigm. It's more about the ethnos and the culture functioning together as one in unison and cohesion and keeping that flow. And it's about rites and rituals that are coming of age and being accepted into
Blah 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 blah.
paradigm of
Skip forward a few seconds.
Hmm?
Blah 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 blah. Skip forward a few seconds.
Skip forward a few seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
just anybody can just be, free for all. It's not at all. It is specifically designed by the community of the people who functioned in this whole. And we are unique. We do have differences. What's important to a tribe like way up on the Baltic Sea might be very different than the people living in one of the Greek city-states. I mean, their environment is going to be different. Their climate is going to be different. Their way of living is going to be different. Their language is different. So it is very ethnic specific.
I'd say that those are merely a consequence rather than the
Those are
fundamental
ethnic, those
thing.
are cultural.
What?
Those are cultural, not ethnic.
Yeah. Again, she's conflating gaynos with ethnos here.
Mm-hmm.
It is very much cultural appropriation to just willy-nilly pick and choose. I think that liberal pagans are actually very big hypocrites when they endorse that, and it has nothing to do with some sort of racist ownership. Like, my God, you can't have my God. But
That's exactly what you're making it
I mean,
out
the
to
thing
be,
is,
though.
we can.
Sorry, can you?
So that's exactly what she's making it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn from other cultures, of course. We can have respect for other cultures. And if there's a deity that stands out and is interesting, I mean, if somebody's very interested in Krishna or Shiva from the Hindu pantheon, I'm sure you can learn from that. I'm sure you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But the point is that these ethnic faiths are designed to work within the paradigm.
The design?
Sorry, you were saying?
The design?
Yeah, that's. She's.
Freaking atheist.
Yeah. I guess you could say that, but. Sorry, it was something I was about to say just passed by me. Anyway, let's continue.
People where they originated. So it's not wrong to be folkish. In fact, it's historically accurate to be folkish. It's wrong to be a universalist, whether you are a right-wing white Christian universalist or a left-wing pagan universalist. Universalism has nothing to do with paganism at all, and it's a bastardization. So that said, now that I've gotten that out, I'm going to take a quick peek at the chat and see what you guys are talking about. I'm sure we don't have any universalist pagans even listening to this.
Let's just.
Oh, hey, universalist.
Let's just go for it a bit.
See you guys talking about folkism and
how big, strong Vikings they are.
well, if anybody has any questions
with horned helmets, which for those who don't know, by the way, Vikings never had horned helmets.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
It's just like in the mainstream where these lefty universalist pagans, they think they run the show because their views are
We do.
compatible with mainstream leftism.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, what, Calon?
I said we do. No, no. This is just the same right wing. Oh, we're so oppressed. We're on the right. Yada yada yada. Trash. That's out there.
But I think there is, even though this is a terrible point, there's a little bit of a conflict in this regard because many some ideas that were prevalent in these religions that we are trying to reconstruct and revive are 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 within the context of the ancient time period, whereas today those same things may not be extant. So and and one must trying to words here. Anyway, you just have to. Anyway, sorry, just I can't words right now for whatever reason.
Which is being pushed in all areas. It's being pushed on the media, it's being pushed on the TV, it's being pushed in schools and academia.
Wait,
I was
pagan
at a
stuff is being
Renaissance
pushed.
fair
What?
and
Huh?
Wait, pagan stuff is being pushed in academia?
No, I think she's saying leftist things are being pushed in
Oh,
academia.
this tired old line. The conflation between liberalism and leftism.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up I got separated from my family and I saw two guys standing there with hammers around their necks. So I was like, "Oh, cool. Hey, you got them Mjolnir and I'm wearing one too." And we start talking and there's two of them. They were like buddies. They definitely didn't seem gay or anything like that, but
Oh, because
That's
being gay is such
interesting.
a
Is she a homophobe or transphobe?
I'd assume
She's-
so. They usually are.
she's on the right and she's a Folkist. What do you think?
I see.
Yeah.
Rhuagh just responded saying, "Yep." Well, I see then. Duly noted.
but one of them was more friendly than the other one. The other one was standoffish. I almost think like maybe he suspected who I was right from the get-go.
Yeah, a
Then we got into-
parasite.
Anyway.
Somehow we got into folkism because you know me, I'm not the type of person to keep things light ever. I'm not the type of person to not go there ever. So of course somehow or another I brought it up and I was like, but don't you think that ethnic faith should be ethnic? And they just got, one of them was at least willing to talk about it with me. The other one got so triggered. He basically said to his friend, "Come on, we're leaving." You could
I see. So using triggered in a distinctly non-mental health way, in a non-mental health context. Yeah, that's really
I mean,
great.
she seems to be the one who's triggered
Yeah, I mean,
in the colloquial sense.
yeah. What a special snowflake she is.
Mm-hmm.
tell
Pretty
like,
ugly
he was
one.
the one who drove, so the other guy just kind of had to go along with it. Just like, wow, really? You're gonna leave the whole thing just because I brought up folkism?
Well, yeah, because folkism is ahistorical. It doesn't make any sense theologically, and it's very much associated with racism.
So, yeah.
So, yes, it will be discounted.
But I remember in this conversation looking at these guys, and they were both very fair-skinned, like blue-eyed, light hair.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
Nazi.
Yep. I see. I see.
No, by the way, these guys don't actually exist.
Really?
Probably not. No, these are just fake. These are just straw men.
Yeah. But
Or one of those like preacher type stories where they bring out this example of a specific atheist they met who probably never existed in the first place.
Yeah.
yeah. Also, the idea of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people being a superior race is it's not just a Nazi talking point, but it's also very ahistorical.
Anyhow, it's 7:20 for now, and I think I've had about enough of her as I can stand.
Yeah, I was having a little bit of difficulty just understanding what exactly she means by a lot of these, and also she's just very historically incorrect. Anyway, it was great having Calon, Calon, and Via on, and we're going to now transition into the after show, the after party, which will be on our Discord server, which is in the description down below. So it's been really nice having some familiar faces in the chat to talk with. Anyway, that's that.
We'll see you there.
Yeah, we will see you there.